They say there's a calm before the storm. If you're not prepared for it, or if you don't have a plan, the consequences can be devastating. Dealing with workplace violence is like preparing for a storm. You can choose to address the potential problem or deny it even exists.
There is massive denial about the problem of workplace violence. And that denial, in many respects, is to be expected. After all, it is only natural that we want to have workplaces that are free from aggression. It's only natural that we want to believe that the problem of violence is out there and not over here. But the reality is that the violence that's been out there has now seeped into the workplace.
I almost feel like that on September 14th, 1989 at 8:37, I was killed because I am not the person that walked into that place of employment that morning. First of all, I'm paralyzed, so nothing in my life is going to be the same as it was. He parked on 6th Street and got into the elevator and came directly to the 3rd floor. Sharon, the regular receptionist, had come in early, so I was standing there exchanging with her phone messages what was going on and everything. Right as I started to step away, I had my purse on my arm, coffee cup in hand, and a file. The elevator doors opened, so I just looked back to see, well, who's here? And he stepped off. At that time, we couldn't see the gun that he was carrying. But he had a really strange look on his face. And I looked at her, and she looked back at me. I didn't know who he was. And she said, "Can I help you with something?" He never answered. He just kept walking toward us. And it was like immediately I knew something was wrong. And he got about 2 or 3 feet from the edge of the desk, which was maybe 4 feet from me, and he dropped this gym bag off his arm, and he had a gun. Well, Sharon screamed, and I didn't react at all. As soon as she screamed, he just started to spray the room, and he sprayed bam, 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 bam all across the room. And he took off running down the hallway toward the area that Human Resources would be in. And I could still hear shots. They sounded really close. And then I heard a lot of shots, and then I didn't hear any, but I heard footsteps running. And I looked up and I realized he had run back to where we were. He picked up the gym bag that he had left. And he probably wasn't there for 5 seconds, but it just seemed like an eternity. I could just feel that barrel of the gun, and I could see the shadow of it. And I remember crying out. I closed my eyes and I cried out, "Please don't kill me, please don't. I've got a baby, please don't kill me." And he turned really fast, and he grabbed this big wooden door that separated the lobby from the hallway. It was never closed. He grabbed that and he just slammed it. And then I didn't hear anything. I couldn't hear what was going on between us and the hallway. And I called to Sharon.
"Is he out there? Is he out there? Sharon, talk to me. Are you okay? Oh my God. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a joke."
And she said it like 10 times. Then she never said anything again after that. So she was dead there. By the time he was finished, there were 8 people that had died and 12 people that had been seriously wounded.
According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, homicide is currently the 2nd leading cause of work-related deaths in the United States. The impact of the human and economic cost due to workplace violence is shattering.
It's estimated that the more severe kinds of violence, physical assaults, rapes, murders, those kinds of things, probably cost the U.S. economy at a very, very conservative estimate of $4.2 billion a year. And that is growing extremely, extremely rapidly.
Even more expenses can result from repair and cleanup, mental health services, and increased security. Other types of workplace violence are often forgotten, such as intimidation and threats, sexual assaults, property damage. The list goes on and on. Often these other types of violence are early indications that more severe types of violence will eventually occur, such as homicide.
This program was created to help you understand various types of workplace violence and to combat this growing threat to production, to property, and most importantly, to people. You'll learn how to implement a violence prevention program and how to deal with an actual incident of violence. It all begins with awareness.
Depending on how strongly you believe violence can happen in your organization will determine your willingness to start preventing it. Our unstable economy, widespread job layoffs, a rigid authoritarian style of management, insensitive terminations, pressure for increased productivity, psychological instability, lack of individual responsibility. These conditions can lead to employee frustration, which can cause stress and conflicts in the workplace, and even homicide. Other causes of workplace violence include obsessive love affairs and domestic disputes spilling into the workplace. Although violence of any type is intolerable, it's easy to see how it has become such a serious threat to American workers. Most cases of workplace violence don't just happen. The best way to identify potential violence is to recognize warning signs. Perpetrators often leave a series of clues. A potentially violent employee is usually argumentative, does not cooperate with others, has a tendency to be a loner, does not accept authority well, and frequently blames others for his or her problems. This person's whole reason for existing and self-esteem is dependent on the job. In fact, their job is their life. Other signs are changes in work patterns, such as lowered productivity, frequent absences and tardiness, more on-the-job accidents, extreme and bizarre behavior, even depression and alcohol and drug use. Be alert to potentially violent behavior at all times, specifically verbal threats, such as, "If I'm fired, there'll be hell to pay," or "I won't be the only one leaving this place." A history of violence is often a good indicator of future violence.
We used to take him out in the back and nobody ever heard from him again.
If someone talks about previous violent episodes or has an unusual interest in weapons, this could be a warning sign. Keep in mind that a potentially violent person may not exhibit all of these signs. Likewise, it's important not to make a hasty judgment about someone. You should use common sense and avoid stereotyping people. Just because someone is having a bad day, for example, and may appear frustrated, does not necessarily mean this employee will return the next day and perform a violent act.
We need to begin to understand the person in the context of the whole situation. We can't just run around willy-nilly applying these profiles, because we can get in very serious managerial and very serious legal problems with that.
There are three reasons why employers should have violence prevention programs. Number one is just the threat of lawsuits. We recently saw a case that settled for more than $10 million. Lots of lawsuits. Number two is the problem of regulation. Under the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, an employer has, under that Act's General Duty Clause, a responsibility to respond to recognized threats. In fact, threats of violence are recognized threats. Thirdly, good business. We know that organizations with low levels of violence are going to be more productive, more efficient, and therefore more profitable.
The employees need to know that management cares, that management is looking out for them, that they're doing all that they possibly can. It may not entirely stop anybody or everybody who wants to get in. That's not the issue. The issue is doing as much as can be done. So one has to have a very, very strong prevention program in place.
The purpose of the program is to assess the general threat of violence, encourage open communication about the subject, develop policies and procedures for handling acts of aggression, and implement training for employees and management. For your violence prevention program to work effectively, the entire workforce must act as a team to protect one another. The first step in creating your violence prevention program is to assess the likelihood of violence in your organization. Depending on the size of your company, the Human Resources Department or Safety Director can conduct this assessment or use a specialist such as an industrial psychologist. First, find out if there have been any incidents of violence of any kind in the past. Examine those situations. How were they handled? How should they have been handled? Next, determine how fearful your employees are of possible violence. Distribute a written survey and solicit response from every employee. Some important questions you should ask are, do you feel you're working in a safe atmosphere? Do you believe any of your coworkers are capable of becoming violent? Why? Would you know what to do if a coworker became violent? What security problems do you worry about? This survey will help you determine the scope of your problem and develop specific procedures to prevent potentially violent situations. In addition to surveys, encourage an open forum by assembling groups of employees to discuss the subject of violence, perhaps at a regular meeting devoted to the subject or at a safety meeting. Gathering employees together can help relieve tension among workers and even boost morale. Open communication is the key to assessing and preventing potential violence in your organization. Encourage employees to discuss their concerns about violence with their appropriate manager. A proactive approach to this workplace hazard is the most effective. When employees at all levels believe that the company cares enough to protect its workers, they become more committed to the effort as well. Next, take a look at the facility itself. What assets need protection? The solution may be as simple as purchasing employee badges, or more diligent control of keys and security codes. Or perhaps you need a security officer, silent alarms, key cards, control gates, maybe even closed-circuit television. It all depends on the analysis of your specific needs.
Listening to the needs and concerns of your employees and organizing your thoughts accordingly are the keys to a good, solid plan. But remember, your plan must be tailor-made. There is no one-size-fits-all solution.
Policies and procedures should be in place to prevent and to handle violence. A threat management team is one way to fulfill this responsibility. Team members selected from various departments could provide unique solutions. The team could be comprised of participants from security, safety, human resources, outside licensed counseling or employee assistance, the legal department, and especially frontline employees. The team's primary function is to develop and implement policies regarding threats. They should use the information obtained in the needs assessment to develop organization-specific policies. Begin by establishing a clear anti-violence policy. It must explicitly state that violence of any kind is unacceptable and that threats must be reported. Be sure this policy is in writing. Perhaps initially present it in a newsletter, a memo, or display it on a poster. Also establish where threats should be reported and who should document them. It could be the Human Resources Director, a supervisor, or even the owner of the company. To ensure confidentiality, an independent 800 hotline, or for a smaller company, a telephone answering service is an effective mechanism for reporting threats. Keep in mind that employees are reluctant to appear as tattletales. Emphasize the most obvious benefit of reporting a threat: saving a life.
Employees need to understand that their decisions may save a life, and that needs to be communicated by senior management. We don't want to underreport problems. We want to report them as comprehensively and thoroughly as possible.
Policies and procedures for handling a crisis, sometimes known as a trauma plan, also need to be developed. For example, how will you deal with the police, hysterical witnesses, notifying victims' families, even notifying customers about delays and changes in schedules? Will you provide counseling services for victims' families? Who will speak to the media? These questions need to be answered before a crisis occurs. Once policies and procedures are developed and documented, regular meetings will help to verify that they are working.
Training in recognizing warning signs, managing stress, and resolving conflict is a vital component in your violence prevention program. In order to prevent violence, everyone needs this training.
All abusive behaviors and acts of aggression should be reported. Perhaps the most obvious warning signs to report, however, are key threatening statements. These threats have often resulted in workplace violence and can be divided into three categories. A direct threat. I'll pay him back. I'll get even with him. A hidden or veiled threat. This place would be shut down for days if the mainframe crashed and the backup were damaged. A conditional threat. If I'm fired, there'll be hell to pay. If you hear similar statements, report them. You may save your co-workers' lives and your own.
If you don't take them all seriously, then the one time you get the threat that is the real threat, you won't be prepared for it because you will have said, well, he's just like all the rest of the guys. So, you know, you can't say that every threat is going to be a follow-through, but you can't say that this threat may not be, because you don't know which ones are going to be the real ones.
Next, know what to report. Make sure you recount the actual behaviors or threats that are made. For example, one report might be, Dave leaned over, pointed his finger at me and said, Bob will soon realize that he cannot treat me like this. Or another report might be, Carl walked up to me, grabbed my arms and threw me against the door and said, why didn't you cover for me? They docked me 3 days' pay.
They docked me 3 days'
Just give the facts, where and when it happened, who witnessed it, and what was said.
Threats need to be reported, but more importantly, they need to be documented. Although it may be someone else's responsibility to do this, take the initiative and make sure your report gets documented.
Typically, perpetrators of workplace violence have been disgruntled and stressed out employees. If you can recognize when you or other employees are stressed and know how to respond, you will be better able to prevent it from escalating. Stress is a psychological or physical tension created by some action or situation. However, if the stresses of your daily life keep your body in this state of alert all the time, eventually your health can break down. Try these methods in dealing with stress. Talk more often about how you're feeling. Build better relationships with people, and don't forget that exercise, nutrition, and the right amount of sleep are equally important in preventing stress. Conflicts and problems can be discussed and diffused before harassing or abusive behaviors develop. It is important to solve conflicts so that problems don't escalate into violent behavior. Compromising on an issue is one way to reach an agreement when both parties have competing goals. Find innovative ways to resolve an issue by the use of collaboration. Or you may want to avoid responding to the conflict at that particular moment if someone else would more effectively resolve the conflict, or if both of you simply need time to cool off. However, when a situation is far too threatening for conflict resolution strategies, follow these diffusion techniques. Talk the person into calming down. Empathize and sympathize. Ask the person what you can do to help him or her. Make sure they know you understand their position by restating what it is they're upset about. Focus on the behavior and not the person.
It may be necessary to distract the person, perhaps even change the subject. These techniques don't fit every situation, so use your common sense. Whatever you do, avoid direct confrontation and argument, and if you think your life is threatened, call out for help. Having a violence prevention program in place is a great mechanism for handling threats. However, every situation cannot and should not be handled in the same way. By watching the following scenario, you'll understand a comprehensive approach to handle threats.
Hey, David. Mitch wants to know if the test results are ready.
Boy, must be tough being a supervisor, huh? I'm doing the work of two guys here. I don't have time for any stupid test samples.
David.
It doesn't stop. Mitch just keeps pushing us to do more.
Okay, well, you'll get around to it.
He's got to stop pushing me. Or I'll push him. I'll push him when he's not looking. Oh, man, you just don't see it, do you?
See what? It's just on deadline, like everyone else.
This is not about deadlines. This is about fairness.
Fairness?
Yes. How much can you expect one person to do?
You got a problem, talk to Mitch.
Talk to Mitch, yeah. I'll do better than that. I'll do something so he knows what it feels like.
Right. See you later.
What should David's co-workers do, and how should the company handle these threats? First, employees at this company have been trained to report threats to anyone on the threat management team. So Jerry and Janice individually report David's threats to the safety director and the human resources director. They document in detail the who, what, where, and when of the threats. The safety director then confers with the human resources director, and she decides to check David's file. She finds no indication of past threats, unusual behavior, not even conflicts between David and co-workers. However, she does find one recent negative performance evaluation out of an otherwise good record. She immediately convenes the team to discuss what to do next.
I want to thank you all for responding.
The team decides to do a background check on David, and the legal representative goes over the various implications of different responses. Meanwhile, the security officer decides to keep an eye on David, and both the mental health professional and the threat manager will meet with him immediately. In meeting with David, they discover that his wife has just filed for divorce. David confesses he's stressed out over it, hasn't been sleeping much, and feels extremely overworked.
I've been pushed from both sides. I've been hurting a lot lately, and I just thought, why shouldn't somebody else be hurting too?
But you know we can't tolerate threats of any kind.
Whether you meant the threats to Mitch or not's beside the point, Dave. We're going to have to act accordingly.
As a disciplinary action, I'm going to ask that you take the rest of the day off. I'll call and I'll let you know when we can meet and discuss any further action.
Discipline may be a suspension. It may be counseling. It needs to occur, needs to take place so that people understand the values of the organization's purpose, and most importantly, the organization's unwillingness to accept such forms of behavior.
Meanwhile, the team's investigation reveals that people have reached out to David in the past, but have been unsuccessful. And he's appeared extremely stressed out at work, but has not voiced any concerns to Mitch, his supervisor. And previous employers have no official records of a history of violence. The threat management team meets again, and all of the information is reviewed. The focus of this meeting is David's potential for violence. They determine that David is probably not an immediate threat, but counseling should be a condition for continued employment.
Remember, every situation is different, but make sure your decision is best for the safety of all your employees. For example, it might be necessary to call law enforcement immediately and suspend or terminate depending on your policies. In the scenario you just saw, everyone made their best efforts to save lives, perhaps even their own. But what if Jerry and Janice had not reported David's threats, and David acted on them?
The threat management team, now a crisis management team, needs to meet with management and human resources personnel to do a comprehensive assessment and learn as much as possible about what has happened. This will help control the anxiety of employees and head off any displaced anger toward the company that might later arise. Within the first 24 hours after the incident, a debriefing meeting for everyone should be held so the feelings and concerns can be understood and explored. In short, Restoration to wholeness is now the team's primary objective.
Employees here at the plant to give them an idea of what...
Establish a violence prevention program now. Utilize it and allow for open communication within your organization. And most importantly, take the time to train everyone about this growing threat to society.
Remember, dealing effectively with workplace violence is like preparing for a storm. The time for boarding up the windows and patching the roof isn't when the storm is upon you and you're waist-deep in water. Weathering out the storm takes planning. The most successful plan is in place before it's needed.
I lost a lot of things, and my family's not the same. My friends are not the same. The people that live near me are not the same. This is just not like he shot 20 people. It's like he shot this whole town, because we were all different after that day. It's never the same. You can't go back. You're just not the person that you were before, paralyzed or not.
It wasn't that long ago that healthcare facilities were considered immune from the violence of the outside world. Unfortunately, the violence that is out there is now making its way in here. Consider this. In one state alone, nearly 60% of hospital employees received injuries from patients or visitors. Also, it has been suggested that as many as 1/3 of all nurses are assaulted each year. Indeed, the biggest rise of violence is being experienced in emergency departments. The potential for violence is compounded when these and other patients are unable to endure long waits, or when denied access to healthcare services. Other areas of healthcare facilities are reporting threats and violent acts as well, including surgical areas, private rooms, and pediatric units. However, the most commonly identified area that has experienced violence is the psychiatric unit. Violence between healthcare workers is also a possibility. Some of the reasons include an authoritarian style of management, psychological instability, job pressure and stress, layoffs, and even insensitive terminations. If you're aware of the potential for violence, you can understand the dangers and know how to respond. By watching this program, you'll have a better understanding of how to spot potential violence by learning the assault cycle, recognize the common characteristics of a potentially violent person, implement verbal and physical maneuvers to diffuse violence, apply chemical and physical restraints when necessary, and deal with the aftermath of an attack. Most likely, your employer has anti-violence policies and procedures already in place. Make sure you know them. But there's also a lot you can personally do to prevent violence and protect yourself. First of all, your attitude is a critical component. Be friendly, listen, and develop innovative ways to help your patients feel more comfortable. Respond promptly and in a caring manner to patients' concerns. A little TLC can go a long way toward preventing hostility. For example, if long waiting periods are unavoidable, give regular updates of the situation. For continuity, only one staff member should talk with patients who seem impatient or frustrated. Second, try to limit wearing restrictive clothing and accessories which can become hazardous in a violent situation. For instance, earrings, necklaces, stethoscopes, bracelets, watches, rings, and ties can become weapons. Likewise, restrictive clothing can inhibit your ability to respond to an assault. Third, exercise regularly and get proper rest. Your physical ability to move quickly and take action is important in responding to a violent incident. Besides personal safety measures, there are safe work practices that will help in preventing violence. First, don't leave potential weapons like scalpels and needles within patients' reach. While patients are being treated, remove any weapons, matches, or cigarette lighters they may have on them. Second, try to obtain a history of violence from the patient. For example, if a patient has a bruised hand, ask how it happened. If a patient admits being in a fight or punching a wall, flag this patient's chart to alert staff and security officers. Try to compile data sheets for all disruptive patients. When a gang member is brought into an emergency department, chances are this patient will be visited by friends or rival gang members. Be on the lookout for gang members and report their presence to security personnel. In fact, depending on how often gangs visit your facility, you may want to have an alternative name for them in order to alert personnel of their presence. Gang members must not be allowed to congregate in your facility. Always address the apparent leader, not the entire group. Be respectful, but clearly give the order to leave. Lastly, learn to report all incidents of violence. It has been suggested that there's a lot more violence occurring in healthcare facilities than has been reported. However, administrators and security experts need to know about all violent incidents and why they occur if they are to develop effective anti-violence strategies. So report every violent incident, even seemingly trivial incidents. Know your facility's security procedures and follow them. For example, if you have a security device or a key card, always use your own and be sure to wear your identification badge. Security officers can help deal with violence and deter it. Keep them informed of potentially violent patients and, when necessary, use their services to get to and from the parking lot. Depending on your facility's needs, security officers may be equipped with radios, mace or pepper spray, handcuffs, and batons. Always have at least 2 ways of communicating with the police or security. Emergency department staff in particular should have at least 2 phone lines in different locations, preferably an outside line or a cellular phone. Be aware of any audible alarms that can be activated to summon help or deter an aggressor. Silent alarms can be activated with a concealed button or foot pedal. In some facilities, staff members carry small personal alarms with them at all times. If you've been issued one, by all means carry it, all the time. Keep in mind that not even a state-of-the-art system can make your facility risk-free. That's why you need to know how to spot potential violence if it does get through the door. Potentially violent people often have a need to dominate or appear as the authoritative one, especially in the presence of others. They may come from dysfunctional homes and lack support systems. They may have experienced mental and physical abuse, suffer psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia and paranoia, have a history of violence, or be involved in drug and alcohol abuse. Keep in mind that a potential perpetrator of violence may have several characteristics other than these. The same holds true for a potentially violent employee or co-worker. Often, there are signs in work patterns, such as lowered productivity, frequent absences, tardiness, and extreme and bizarre behavior. Also, an employee's intent to become violent can be signaled through threats. A direct threat: "I'll pay him back. I'll get even with him." A hidden or veiled threat: "This place would shut down for days if the mainframe crashed and the backup were damaged." A conditional threat: "If I'm fired, I won't be leaving alone." To spot someone who is about to become violent, you need to understand the assault cycle. This is a sequence of events that can happen over a short or long period of time. The assault cycle includes the triggering event, the escalation phase, the assault or attack, the recovery phase, and the post-crisis phase. If you understand these stages, you'll be able to recognize and intervene more effectively. A triggering event can occur when the perpetrator senses some type of loss or threat of loss, such as learning of a death in the family. Next in the assault cycle is the escalation phase. This is a time when the perpetrator exhibits several warning signs that he or she has the potential to become violent. These behavioral clues are evident in his or her posture, speech, motor activity, and attitude. Any of the following signs may indicate someone is about to become violent. Staring, red in the face, rapid breathing, tense or anxious posture, pacing, regularly shifting body positions, challenging staff's authority, shouting, using profanity or making sexual comments. It's important that you are able to spot these signs and intervene immediately. Verbal and physical interventions must be implemented to diffuse violent behavior. First, allow the person to express himself or herself. Try to look without intimidation at the person to show respect and to show that you care. Most importantly, listen to what is being said. This alone could diffuse the situation. Do not embarrass anyone and make sure you treat all patients and visitors with respect. Acknowledge his or her frustration and be sure to speak calmly and softly. Speaking softly might encourage them to lower their voices. Address the specifics of their problem by being honest and asking what they would like you to do or how you can help them feel more comfortable. If despite your best efforts, the attack phase occurs and a person becomes violent, it's time to get help. In general, it's best to call for security and/or police as soon as a potentially violent incident develops. Have many staff members nearby for support. Your body position should be assertive, with your feet hip-width apart and one foot in front of the other to balance yourself. Always try to keep the person at least 1 arm's length away. Try to position yourself between the person and an exit for easy egress. The recovery phase is often thought of as the opposite of the escalation phase. The feelings of frustration or anger that led to violence have now subsided, and the body is relaxed, no longer tense and anxious. However, if the perpetrator senses any further threat, he or she could become violent again. The post-crisis phase, the last one in the assault cycle, is when the perpetrator may withdraw, become depressed, and even feel remorseful. There are chemical and mechanical restraints available. However, they should not be used as punishment or cause any pain or physical discomfort. You should always maintain the patient's dignity. First, acquire a physician's order for restraint and inform security that restraining is going to take place. Restraining a hostile person takes a team of 3 to 5 trained individuals. Never attempt to do it alone. One person should supervise the entire procedure. Next, explain the reason for restraints and the behavioral criteria that must be met before they will be removed. Make sure all potentially hazardous articles are removed from the person and the room and apply the restraints, making sure they're firm but not too tight. Immediately check circulation, motion, and sensation of the extremity and that the restraint is secure. Monitor the patient closely and keep the restraints visible. Be sure to assess the patient at least every 15 minutes. Make sure the need for restraint is documented, noting specific behaviors that the patient exhibited. During the restraint period, document the type of restraint used, the level of consciousness, circulation of extremities, medications administered, range of motion, toileting needs that were addressed, and fluids or nutrition offered. Release the restraints at least every 2 hours, but not all at once. Remove one extremity restraint every 5 minutes. Every 2 hours, change the patient's position and provide continual nursing care. Chemical restraints may also be used alone or in combination with physical restraints. Chemical restraints will reduce the agitation level of certain patients, reduce how much physical restraint will be needed, and overall help reduce the risk of violence in your facility. Be sure to follow your facility's guidelines for administering chemical restraints that are available. Your employer should have specific procedures in place following an assault, such as crisis intervention and critical incident stress debriefing, or CISD. Immediately following an attack, either verbal or physical, you are vulnerable to more trauma. Depending on the severity of the incident, you should move from that area, take deep breaths, try to calm yourself, and maintain your composure. If necessary, you should be medically evaluated. Injuries may not be apparent for several hours. You should also receive crisis counseling. Express your feelings and remember, experiencing anxiety following an attack is normal. It's a good idea to ask to be moved to another area of assignment, keeping the perpetrator and yourself in separate areas. You may or may not return to work immediately. In fact, if you are still showing indications of severe stress 15 to 30 minutes after the attack, you should not return to work. Discuss this issue with your supervisor or counselor. Victims of verbal and physical assault have different responses. Some of the most common reactions you may have include self-blame, professional self-doubt, emotional disturbances, anger, irritability, and helplessness, distancing, body tension, body soreness where hit, difficulty sleeping, and loss of control. If you notice a coworker with any of these characteristics, report it immediately or talk it over. Encourage him or her to report the act of violence as soon as possible. Fighting violence is a professional challenge, just like curing a disease. Your patients have a right to be treated in a safe environment, and you have a right to work in one. With teamwork, training, and commitment, you can be part of the cure.